going to talk. I think I'm going to talk to guys at this big convention coming up in August to see if they'll let me do a like an hour-long session on this, and I'd love to invite you in for that, or if nothing else, at least get a video from you about it, because this is like a subject that history gamers don't really discuss or really know much about. And as I'm digging into it with you, I realize there's a lot of stuff here that's really very interesting that people should know about. Really.
Well, yeah, it's completely convoluted. For once,
Yeah.
well, for some other things, I guess. I mean, if you're familiar, well, of course, with Vietnam, with the Russian Civil War, with things like that, with the Chinese Civil War and stuff like that, some bits and pieces will be familiar to you.
Yeah. That's very true.
Yeah. But then again, this is World War II, Yugoslav succession wars, and the Cold War all wrapped into one.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, all right. So, anyway, so how do you had a list of things you want to talk about in 42 at some point? Is that what you were doing?
Oh yeah. There's 4 items in the list. Okay, let's. I don't want to get ahead of myself and everything, but it's relatively important, particularly if we start talking about 1942.
Yeah.
Perhaps there should be, perhaps more of a 5-item list than 4. So the first one would be the ethnic question. And the ethnic divisions and in the ethnic warfare. Then a couple of words to rehash the factions that are involved, and a couple of words on the Axis chasing the guerrillas. But then I guess
I guess there were a couple offenses then, but they were probably lower key, I would guess, at that point. But yeah, they did have a couple, didn't they?
Oh yes, they did. Yes, they did. They had actually several, but in terms of being in terms of their strength, I guess that 1941 and 1943 are bigger.
Oh, 43 was huge because that's basically like open warfare. In fact, if somebody were really going to do a game on a part of this history that really attracted like military gamers, you'd probably focus on 43 because that was some really epic fight. Well, in essence, that's kind of what the whole movie about Battle of Neretva is about. It's kind of like a capstone on that whole 43 period there, where Tito is basically pushed to the brink of extinction and still somehow pulls a rabbit out of his hat and survives.
We will be discussing the Battle of Neretva movie in due course, and it's.
I actually saw that movie, by the way. I watched that movie, so I kind of like, wow, this is really confusing. But it's a we could do a whole session on just that alone. I think just that movie.
Oh yes, oh yes. I mean, it's confusing, by design.
Yeah, it really is.
You can't say the quiet parts loud.
All right, you'll have to coach me through that because I know I'm going to make a misstep on that particular topic, but we're not there yet. We got a few more sessions before we get to that.
We have time until that. But honestly, my take is that 1941, in 1942 actually should not be underestimated in terms of the Axis versus guerrilla struggle. Yes, there was more, I guess, open warfare in 1943.
Right.
But I would argue that the impact of 1941 and 1942 was greater.
Well, that's kind of what we're going to be talking about the next couple of sessions, because I'm not really sure at what point it transitions from like Mikhailovich trying to set up a Serbian republic to now you're kind of like holding back a bit. You're trying to kind of build your strength a little bit so that you can get ready for the next fight. So 42, they're not really fighting each other a lot, at least the partisans and the Chetniks. I mean, The Croats were certainly very busy. I don't think they ever really stopped what they were doing. You have to tell me if I'm wrong on that point.
Well, I guess, you know, as in all things, there is so much details.
Yeah.
That we need to go through because ultimately 1942 is what shapes the conflict, you know, further on.
Okay.
And,
well, let's dig into that then. That's where we're at today.
Okay, and okay, so so the themes would be the ethnic divide, the various factions, the fight of the Axis against the guerrillas,
okay,
the collaboration issue, and I would, you know, specifically mention the manhunt against the Chetniks because this was highly widespread.
So was this the Germans manhunting the Chetniks, or basically everybody?
Yes.
Oh, because they were actually like, they had a bounty on his head at one point, right?
Oh, yes.
And it was probably 42. Well, so we go back to the 41 thing. So pretty much, if you're not aware of the subtleties of what's going on there, this rebellion looks like it's a Mikhailovich thing, like he did it by himself. If you're not aware of the partisans really stirring the pot there. So I guess from the German perspective, it looks like, oh, he started this, so we need to go after him because he's the one that actually started the rebellion, not realizing that, well, I guess he kind of sort of did start it in a fashion. Well, I mean, he did start it, didn't he? More or less.
Okay, so the Germans, from the perspective of the Germans, they were expecting a communist rebellion, a communist uprising. They were surprised when they realized that this wasn't a communist uprising as such, that the communists just participated in the uprising. The Germans are very much aware that there are two different factions within the guerrilla forces.
Okay.
And but they want to shoot everybody.
Oh, that's going to work.
Yeah.
That always works.
Oh, listen, you know, it worked for Caesar in Gaul.
Yeah, you know. Well, things are a little different there. You didn't have like massive weapons that could shoot at a distance. You didn't have like a really big news network where news got around in a big hurry. I mean, you know, it probably took a couple months to go from like southern Gaul to northern Gaul, whereas, you know, Yugoslavia, it's like a week tops, if even that. Probably not even a week. And then you got a radio, so it's like instantaneous with radios, the news spreading around.
I think honestly that you're a bit underestimating the power of brutality, and that I don't want to get too much contemporary.
You're going to have to address that a bit because, you know, from a U.S. perspective, we don't really understand brutality. We've never really been to that point where brutality is like a thing that goes on. Whereas in the Balkans, this is kind of like it's baked into your society. This has been going on for a long time. So in the back of your mind, you realize, oh, we can actually be pretty brutal at some point. In America, we don't really have that understanding, which is kind of weird because we're pretty brutal during our colonial expansion, but we've kind of forgotten about all that.
That's very true. Yes, during the expansion, obviously the U.S. settlers were very brutal, and you know, the federal government against the Indians and so on and so forth. Of course, you know, American bombing can be very brutal also.
Yeah. But we're kind of immune to the consequences of it as Americans because we're not the ones getting hit. Well, actually, it's kind of funny because it applies in our discussions because I think the Serbians are still kind of mad at the U.S. for bombing them in the 90s, and the U.S., for the most part, has forgotten about it. We don't pay any attention to it. But correct me if I'm wrong, I think in Serbia, it's like a really big deal. You still feel this.
Of course.
And we don't even notice it here, which is kind of sad. We should notice it, but we've totally forgotten about it.
Yes. And so, you know, for instance, we have that experience from 1999, the American bombing. But push that experience times 10, times 20, times 30.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Then we need to we need to focus on this because this is the part that might be kind of hard to understand if you're not from the Balkans or from Eastern Europe, because Eastern Europe has like a whole long history of these sorts of things. Well, obviously it's going on in Ukraine right now, for example, but okay, brutality. And so the Germans actually brought this to the table, and actually from their missives, was it 10-1 or 101? So like any German guy that got killed, they would kill, was it 10 Serbians or 100 Serbians? I don't remember the number.
It's 100.
100? Wow.
And they actually did it. So
really?
Think of this.
Okay.
You have a German division, undersized division, 10,000 men.
Okay. That's like 2/3 strength or so, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. 10,000 men. Say that the Serbs managed to kill a German division.
Ooh.
You know.
Okay. That's
somehow.
10,000 men. All right. Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay. So what would happen then?
Well, in theory, they'd go kill 1 million Serbs, even though I don't know if they could actually pull that off, but that's the theory.
Yeah, that's the intention. For every German that was actually killed and for every German that was actually wounded, they killed 100 Serbs, Jews, Roma, the people in Serbia.
I have to ask, from a Serbian historian position, did any of your historians actually go out and kind of like check these numbers, or you just kind of took it at like they did kill 1 million people, for example? I don't think they actually killed. Actually, did they kill 1 million Serbs during the war? I don't know.
The Serbs didn't destroy a German division.
Well, I know that, but they must have killed a couple 100,000 Serbs, I would guess.
Yes, I think that that might be on the stronger side estimate, but I mean it might be a good estimate, because ultimately
go ahead.
Ultimately, there is a huge discussion on how many Yugoslavs were actually killed during the war, and how many of these were Serbs. But we can safely assume that more Serbs were killed than either the British or the Americans during World War II.
Oh, I'm sure of that, because that's not a. I mean, for the Americans, it's not a high bar to get over, because I think we probably suffered the least casualties amongst the major powers of the war. Whereas, in Yugoslavia, the war was going on the entire length. I mean, you were basically fighting from 41 to 45. So there were 4 years of conflict inside the country. So a lot of people are just going to get killed incidentally just because of the fighting. Never mind if there's like specific killing of people.
Yeah, there's also specific killing of people, of course, targeted by the Croat and Bosniak Ustase. So there's that. Then there's the Germans. Between them, God knows how many Serbs they killed. There's a huge, discussion on this. Everybody is trying to reduce the number of Serbs killed. They're only estimates in any case, because you can't possibly.
You don't really know.
Yeah. But you have German reports.
Yes. Oh, the Germans are so good at keeping records. Yes. Let's hear about the German reports.
Well, basically for 1941, they're saying that they killed around 7,000 or 8,000 in combat and killed around 20,000 in shootings.
That's still a huge percentage, because Serbia isn't that big a country. I don't know how many people live there. I'm sure you must have, 15 million, I guess?
No. Whole Yugoslavia had about 15 million.
Okay, so the Serbian part of that would be probably 8 million, I guess. So when you kill,
I'm going towards 6 or 7 million, probably 7.
Okay. Oh, that's right, because there's such a large number of other groups there. I just know that the Serbians are like by themselves the biggest group.
Yes.
But they're just a slice compared to the entire ethnic pie there, because there's a lot of ethnicities there.
Oh,
okay.
When you mention this, let me share a map so it can be a bit more. And actually, it's going to be a German map.
Yeah, the Germans are so good at keeping records, man.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's good or bad. It's kind of hard to say.
Well, it depends.
Yeah, if you're engineering, it's great. You want records if you're an engineer.
I don't.
Actually, you're a lawyer. You probably like records too, don't you?
Yes, we like records.
Yeah.
But okay, nice, nice. Can you see it?
Oh, wow. That's a nice map. Oh, goodness. Okay. That's a good, wow, that's a really good one.
So it's Yugoslavian. So it's a German map
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
1940. Interesting tidbit is that they're actually splitting up the Slovenes into two distinct ethnicities.
Hmm. I
So
wonder
I think
why.
I think that they wanted to Germanize the pink ones. And in any
Oh, no.
case, yeah.
So what's the light green ones there kind of in the Italian zone? Yeah, that would have been Italian zone, right?
The light, yeah. Let me see. Yeah, that would be the Italian zone, I think. Yeah,
Okay.
that would be. And the pink one would be the part annexed by Germany.
Yeah. Okay.
So okay, you got the dark green ones, which would be the Croats.
Yep.
Yeah, the light green ones, which would be the Serbs, and I
Yeah.
don't know the we would call
Those
them olive greens. That would be the Muslims.
are they Muslims or Bosniaks? I guess probably. Well, Muslims
That's
are kind of
interchangeable.
Yeah.
That's
Exactly.
for Yugoslavia. That's interchangeable.
Yeah.
Muslims might be more accurate because Bosniaks. Okay,
True.
it's difficult to explain.
Yeah.
Because it would. This is before World War II, so this is
Right.
at this time the most how do you call it, the majority population, not in terms of absolute majority, but in terms of the greatest population in Bosnia, were the Serbs.
Hmm. Oh boy, that's going to be awkward. So they're
Yeah,
always going to have affinity for the Serbian motherland. Like I don't know what do you call it, motherland, or do you guys have a different term for that?
I think fatherland is more accurate
Fatherland.
for
Okay.
Serbs.
Okay.
I think motherland would be more for Croats and fatherland for the Serbs. In any case,
Okay.
at this time, Bosniaks were Muslim Serbs,
Right.
in
Muslim
essence.
Serbs. Okay.
Well, Serbs of Muslim faith.
Yeah.
Uh,
Interesting.
when the Axis Croatia was created, they became Muslim Croats.
Right. Actually, from what I could tell, the Croats realized they kind of had a bit of a minority pie here, so they were actually trying to woo the Muslims over to their side because they actually needed all the support they could get, and they kind of figured that if they appeal to Muslim sympathies and say, "Hey, you're part of the Croat nation," you might get more people coming over your cause that way. At least that's the way it struck me when I was reading about it.
Of course.
Hmm.
So if you want to massacre and expel Serbs, then you want all the support that you can get.
Oh, interesting. So, were there a lot of massacres in Bosnia? Yeah. Well, yeah, because this is kind of Greater Croatia during this time period. So, yeah, there would have been a lot of massacres.
Yes, there would have been
Hmm.
a lot of massacres.
Ah, what is this? What is this map? Oh, these are the locations of massacre sites. Oh boy.
Yes.
Oh, that's a big deal, man. So there's nothing in Slovenia, really? Or they haven't
Well,
really
this is
looked in
no.
Slovenia.
This is, to be precise, this is the massacre of Serbs. So, of
Oh,
course,
oh, okay.
so it's
So
done by the Ustase. So this is not,
okay,
the things done by Germans,
right,
the
right.
things done by partisans, in
Holy cow, that's a
45, so on.
lot. That's a lot. What's the green ones?
Honestly,
I guess you could tell me what the
yeah,
colors are, because I just assumed like black was
yeah.
German
I'm
and
not
okay.
even sure. I'm not even sure
Oh,
what the
okay.
colors are. It's
Uh, yeah.
there's there's an explanation to this. This is somewhere on Google Maps, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is you're basically killing people that weren't necessarily part of the war to begin with, but then when you start killing these people, well, now they become part of the war, because it's like, wow, if I don't take a stand, you're going to kill me. So I'm going to grab some guns and I'm going to make sure you don't kill me. I'm going to save my family or save my community or whatever.
Exactly.
So pretty much every one of these marks a point where you radicalize people. So
exactly.
If you look at this, there's no surprise that by 43, 44, there were probably hundreds of thousands. I don't think there were a million troops, so there were definitely several 100,000 people on both sides carrying arms and fighting each other by like 43, 44. Well, late 43, 44, basically.
Yes, that's the huge problem. Once you once you let the genie out of the bottle, or once you lit up the powder keg, there's no way to go back. And honestly, there's a lot of discussions on the Serbs, the Chetniks did massacres of I don't know, Bosniaks or Muslims or Croats or what. This is what happens. Once you start these things, how do you exactly stop them?
You kind of really don't for a while, until people get tired of blowing each other up, and then you can stop it. But until that point, so here's a funny side note. I see the city of Tuzla is really highlighted on this particular map you're showing, or at least the version I'm looking at. That was the one city in your neck of the woods I've actually visited. Was Tuzla.
Yes, that's a city. That's a city with a Muslim majority. So
interesting.
No Serbs available there, and of course this is all very highly regional. So
yes.
Particularly when we talk about the Muslims or the Bosniaks. So in some cases, they would participate in the massacres. In some cases, they wouldn't.
Right.
Yeah.
So in a way, that's just kind of like your ethnicity map. So like there were a lot of Serbians where all the crossbones are at, but not too many where there aren't any crossbones.
Yes. Let me share again the ethnicity map.
That's a good map.
See, we might do an overlap of these. So that's the thing. So
actually, you can see the overlap without even putting on top of each other. You can see it. Wow. Yeah. Okay.
I mean,
pretty stark.
So that's the point. In in Serbia, there is in Serbia proper, the Moravian Serbia, there is an indigenous reason why the Serbs, hate the Germans, hate the occupiers, want to revolt, so on and so forth. Here in Axis Croatia, in today's Bosnia, things like that, Serbs are revolting because they're being basically murdered. So it's either they revolt or they get killed. So it's either or.
It's pretty simple decision to make, and that's what. So I keep telling people here, we got a little radicalization going on in our country. It's like, well, I can tell you how this all ends, but at some point you're going to wind up picking a side because there's just too much violence going on. You don't have much choice. You have to take a stand somewhere.
Yes, and ultimately, of course, because there's massacres of Serbs happening, the Serbs are going to, fight against it, and they're obviously not going to go and stop and say, okay, we've fought off the attack, we can go home now. So there's a lot of revenge that's going to be going on.
Oh yeah. So is this what was going on in 42? Really, once the 41 rebellions kind of calmed down a bit, so they were really leaning into this sort of fight, or?
Well, this fight is going to go on throughout the war. However, there's going to be several things that will be happening in 1942 that will be partially putting a damper on the ethnic warfare.
Okay.
And actually, this is linked to the collaboration discussion.
Okay. Yeah.
So this collaboration discussion is going to be very broad and very interesting because it has a lot of facets. And let me just put it this way. If you're looking this as an American or a British guy, you're saying, well, we want those Yugoslavs to fight on our side, and, if they're killed, too bad.
Yeah.
If you're on the ground, you have a very different view of these things, and being a British or an U.S. ally is very nice, but ultimately what they want you to do is brain dead.
Yeah.
They actually, they're actually helping you to get killed. So there's a whole other discussion to be said about what the aspect of the allies. And you should not, you shouldn't be expecting that the allies will come off as good guys here.
Oh no, actually, I got a funny story for you that's slightly related. So I'm going to a convention in August, and there's a I wonder if they still have that up. So they had a museum display about Operation Halyard in there, and it was pretty thorough from an American perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, you know what? This would really, if that's still there, it'd be really good for maybe one of our episodes for me to maybe walk through and show that to you, so you can kind of see the American perspective on this. And we completely gloss over this Chetnik-Partisan divide. They don't even talk about that. In fact, you can imagine the one thing they talk about is obviously rescuing downed Allied pilots, which, I mean, from an Allied perspective, that's pretty cool. From on the ground perspective you're talking about, it's like, well, maybe we'll get some extra stuff from the Allies for this, but that's about as far as your concern goes. You're just doing it to build up goodwill. You don't exactly exist for the sake of saving Allied pilots. You just save Allied pilots because they fell in your territory, and you may get some goodwill out of that when you return the pilots. That's as far as your analysis goes when you're on the ground. So that might be a really fun exercise for me to walk through this display if it's still there when I get there, and we can compare the on-the-ground version that you're looking at versus, an outsider's point of view, where they're not even worried about this fighting going on inside the country. They don't really care.
Well, let me put it this way. Unfortunately, I don't have too much knowledge on how people saw it back then.
Right.
You can only imagine after the American bombing from 20 years ago how people see it now.
Oh yeah.
It's.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. They actually probably hit some Yugoslavians. I don't know what they actually bombed in there. I'm assuming a lot of their missions were targeting Ploesti, which, makes sense. You kind of want to hit the one thing that you're obvious about. But to get there, you have to fly over Yugoslavia, generally, considering that they're coming from Italy when they're bombing these things. So a lot of bombers would have got shot down over Italy, but they had to have bombed things inside of Yugoslavia too, because there was a fair amount of industry there during the war.
Yes, they did. I think that Belgrade is the only Allied capital that was bombed.
Well, London got bombed too, but yeah, I get your point.
They leveled some cities, and they're not fondly remembered. Let me put it there.
Well, go imagine that. If you were dropping bombs on my town for 4 years, I would not really think highly of you for the remainder of my life. No.
Well, this was actually only 1 year, but it was very how should I say it? It was concentrated. Okay, so yeah, so there's that. So we'll discuss the Allied, the Allied influence, at greater length as we go on. At this point, just that simply there's a huge ethnic conflict going on in
right.
This would be Croatia or Axis Croatia.
Right.
And this would generate Chetnik and Partisan units.
Oh, wow, yes. You're right, because they kind of went both ways. They didn't necessarily line up on one side or the other. They lined up on both sides.
Well, what happens is that somehow, initially these were just, rebels, guerrillas,
right.
Serb protection units. And afterwards, they slowly coalesced into greater formations, and both the Chetniks and the Partisans want to take control of them.
Right.
So what happens was, sure.
Oh, so would 42 be the time that these units are starting to coalesce? Because they're not really big units at the beginning of 42, but I'm assuming some of these units, they started changing from raw guerrillas to like more of a paramilitary group during this period, right?
Yes, actually, it depends on who are we talking about. For instance, in eastern Bosnia, there is a local leader called Dangic who controls.
Okay.
Who controls either 10 or 20,000 Chetniks.
Oh, that's actually quite a bit. Okay.
Yeah, actually, when the uprising in Serbia is crushed, this is the next German target, because Dangic is now the greatest guerrilla force available.
Oh, right, because Mihailovic is kind of like scattered at this point, or he's lying kind of low here, and Tito isn't really very strong at this point.
Yes. So at the end of 1942, we have the situation that the Eastern Bosnia uprising is the biggest. So you have a couple of thousand partisans there, and you have 10,000, 20,000 Chetniks. Unfortunately, Wikipedia is not very informative on this, because they try to reduce the number of Chetniks as opposed to the number of partisans, but we have the German reports here.
Oh, right. So there would have actually been some revisionist stuff going on long after the war. Okay, so what do the Germans have to say about this?
Well, the Germans mentioned 10,000 in the documents that we have that were compiled by the Communist Army.
Okay.
And we have 20,000 by the documents compiled by the immigration researchers.
Oh. So,
but in any case, Dangic is now the biggest force in terms of guerrilla, in terms of guerrilla strength.
Okay.
And what happens is Germans had 5.5 divisions in Serbia. They leave the 3 divisions that were garrison divisions. 1.5 frontline divisions go back, and one frontline division, goes over to Eastern Bosnia.
Oh. Is this pretty much the extent? Well, it's not really the extension of the original campaign. They actually started a new campaign after they finished off the original Serbian Republic. They started another campaign to get rid of the Eastern Bosnian forces.
Exactly.
So, so this is a map. So this is the Montenegro border, or a little further north of that?
Well, you have, this is the part between Bosnia, Serbia, and Montenegro.
Right. So this is where this second republic is?
The communists are now expelled into Montenegro.
Ah, okay.
While there is a liberated territory in East Bosnia.
East Bosnia. Okay, so that's over. So southeast of Sarajevo.
Well, more of a northeast of Sarajevo, but
up there. Okay.
Yeah, it's basically where the Serbs live. However, there is a divide between the Chetniks and the Partisans.
Okay.
For one thing, and for the other, the Germans, the Croats, and the Italians want to crush the guerrillas, but they want to go about it in different ways.
Right. Yeah.
And
so
now,
was this outside the Italian zone then? Because I thought the Italians were in Montenegro.
Italians are in Montenegro. They're basically almost south of Sarajevo.
Oh, so they don't have any part of this. This is like right on the edge of their territory.
They do. They're going to they're going to make I think 2 offensives called Trio.
Oh. Okay.
Which means Germany, Italy, and Croatia.
Right, yeah.
And but of course there are 3 sides, and those 3 sides have a little bit of a different agenda going on.
I don't think they ever really cooperated much at all, really. But yeah.
Well, when they needed to crush Yugoslavia as a state, they cooperated, but a day after that, they started infighting.
Yeah, they're back to their old stuff. Boy.
Okay. So there is actually an Italian, there is an intrigue going on. So the Germans want to crush, they want to crush the communists, and they want to crush Dangic.
Okay, that's kind of ambitious, but all right, you got to admire their ambitiousness.
Well, you will ultimately see that this was within their power, but there is an item that helped them a lot.
Because this is like really rough terrain to fight in right there. This is all kind of borderline mountainous, but it's really rugged terrain. So it's really benefits the guerrillas, this terrain that they're in here.
Yes, and now we get into the so-called collaboration territory.
Okay, that's important.
Yeah, it is, because ultimately, basically, almost everybody talked to everybody else.
Sure. Yeah, that's funny, but yeah.
Yeah. So again, this is. I'm going to use the word annoying when I hear, the collaboration accusations from communist or British historians and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Because, in terms of collaboration, there's going to be a communist episode that's going to blow everything out of the water.
Oh.
And in terms of collaboration, accusations from, British or anybody else are frankly ridiculous, because people here are, fighting for their lives and not.
Yeah.
It's very nice, that you can, give lessons from London, but,
the bottom line is you're on the ground, you need to survive, and quite frankly, you're probably going to take help from anybody that's willing to give it to you. It doesn't really matter what side they're from. If you're helping me, I'm going to take your assistance.
So what's going to happen? First of all, the communists are going to kill people.
They're not going to kill people?
The communists are going to kill people.
Oh, going to kill people. Okay, that's what I thought. All right, go ahead.
Yes.
Make sure I heard that right, which I didn't.
they go on a killing spree against the nationalists, against the Serb nationalists, for one thing, in their territories. For another thing, there is there's a series of German reports saying that the communists and Ustase are cooperating against the Chetniks.
Oh, that's interesting.
What's even more interesting is that these reports are also transferred in the communist documents compiled by the communists after the war.
Oh.
With some minor mistranslations, as you can imagine. And also, it seems that they omitted a situation where the Ustase shared ammunition with the communists.
Oh, interesting. So
that's one side.
So a question at this point, real quick, like we don't need to belabor this point too far, but since Tito was a Croat by birth, does this have any sway as far as the Ustase go, or do they just don't really care that he was a Croat? Because I would assume you get some Croatian sympathies out of that.
According to some reports, yes, this is very relevant for the Ustase, and they want to make sure that the Croats are in control of the partisan movement.
I see. So they're actually trying to do their, I don't want to call it Tito game, but basically trying to take over what Tito's doing.
Well, either that or help Tito.
Right. Because basically, from the Croat perspective, this getting rid of Serbians just helps the Croats immensely. And quite frankly, from their point of view, they don't really care how it happens, so long as they get rid of the Serbians, whatever it takes to do that.
Or either drive a wedge between the Chetniks and the partisans, thereby preventing their cooperation and the destruction of Croatia. So
Okay,
what
that makes
happens?
sense.
Yeah, what happens is that we have these reports. We also have from the Chetnik side that they made contacts with the Italians.
Huh. Okay. Oh boy.
Which is completely normal in Croatia, because the
Yeah.
Italians are the only ones that they're preventing the Ustaše from killing Serbs. For Montenegro,
Oh,
this is a self-protection measure in order to somehow get rid of the partisans.
yeah. Wow.
And furthermore, you have this. This is going to be the most convoluted episode, I guess, but bear with me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be a couple. This is probably gonna be 2 episodes, I think, because there's a lot to unwind here. All right, go
Yeah,
ahead.
we'll wrap this up with this Dangic episode. So you just
Okay.
it's one side it's important because you'll find out what's happening. On the other side, it gives the adequate flavor. You really need to understand how things work, and as opposed to this is not Hollywood. This is not the
No, it's
Yugoslav
not.
movies. This is real
No.
life. So
Yeah.
what happens is Dangic is the biggest force in eastern Bosnia.
Okay.
Everybody attacks him. The
Wow.
Germans attack
Okay.
him, the Croats attack him, and the partisans attack him.
Okay.
And they start whittling down his strength. The
Oh,
Dangic says as follows: we can't possibly fight off the Germans.
right.
They're simply too strong. We can't fight them head on. What we do is we let the Germans pass, and we beat up the Ustaše that are following the Germans.
Wow. Okay.
And further on, we don't want to be in Croatia. We don't want to be with these Ustaše people. We want this to be either transferred to occupied Serbia, to the Quisling Serbia government, or given up to the Italians.
Oh, that's interesting.
And Dangic has negotiations with the Germans. Of course, with the former plan, not with the latter, because when the Germans find out that he wants this territory to be taken over by the Italians, they lose their minds. But
yeah, of course.
So there you see, you have a game within a game within a game, and the problem is that Dangic has gone into the open, and everybody's attacking him.
Right.
And he is essentially destroyed.
Ooh. Wow, and this is winter of 42, or I mean, early 42, because this is
early 42. He's basically
so this is before the springtime, really.
Well, basically, this is end of winter, beginning of springtime. What happens is the Serb opposition in eastern Bosnia is crushed. The Croat Ustaše come in. They come in. They start murdering Serb civilians.
Ah, jeez. Always with the murdering.
And the partisans run away. The partisans run away because their position is completely crushed, because basically all the partisan units have dissolved or become Chetniks.
Oh, interesting. That's that's actually a really good stopping point right there, because at this point, things become way more guerrilla oriented for the next year or so, because there aren't really any big formations around at that point, because everyone's like regrouping. Isn't this going to be the start of like the Western Allied influence, though, pretty much right after this? Or is it a little bit later still?
For Tito, it's a little bit later.
Yeah, but I think at this point, the Chetniks start getting some help from the English. It's not a lot, but it maybe is still a little bit later on, because I think it's probably late 42 where the English start trying to make connections here, when the English kind of tilt the North African campaign in their favor, and they can actually start doing things besides North Africa and Greece. They can actually start getting involved in other things. But
well, just as a preview, we will have two different so to say theaters on when we have our next discussion. You will have Tito in the area between Croatia and Bosnia.
Right, that's where he goes, yeah.
And you will have Mihailovic, who is being chased by the Germans and who is actually sabotaging the Germans.
Yeah.
So
this is kind of started like the Serbian sabotage campaign, because I know at some point this all kind of got started, because this is kind of what the English were leaning into initially, is just trying to give supplies to these guys to start sabotaging the Germans. But I don't think this is really kicked off just yet. That'll be 42, late 42?
Yes, this will be 42, either in the summer or in the fall.